Before we gently begin this journey through the quiet rhythms of ancient Roman life, I invite you to take a deep, slow breath and allow your body to find stillness wherever it may be resting right now. Feel the weight of your limbs sinking into the surface beneath you. Notice the way your shoulders soften with each exhale, and let your eyes grow heavier as the present moment surrounds you with calm and simplicity. And if you are enjoying this space of ease, I gently encourage you to support it by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with anyone who may also need a moment of stillness before sleep. And perhaps, if you'd like, leave a comment below telling me where in the world you are listening from and what time of night you press play, so that across distances and time zones we may feel gently connected in this shared ritual of rest. This story we're about to explore is not one of emperors or conquests, not one of grand speeches or marble arches rising into fame, but rather one of quieter things, of daily habits, of morning light filtering through clay shutters, of sandals against mosaic floors, of bread baking slowly in clay ovens, of water drawn from stone basins in the first light of day. We will walk alongside people who live not in history books, but in the slow unfolding of ordinary time, who rose with the sun and moved through streets alive with the hum of voices. And in these gentle steps through a forgotten world, we will find not just the past, but presence, the kind that allows the mind to quiet, the breath to deepen, and sleep to slowly arrive. As we move together through this ancient world, we will not hurry, we will not rush toward conclusions or dates, but instead dwell in the textures of life itself. The creak of a wooden cart passing over uneven stone, the smell of oil and herbs in the afternoon air, the soft patter of footsteps beneath linen garments, the hush of prayer in a shaded atrium, each detail given space to unfold fully, so that your imagination may roam without effort and your body may rest within the rhythm of history gently told. We begin at dawn, as a new Roman day opens slowly with golden light spreading across the rooftops of the Domus, the Roman home. And as the city wakes with quiet rustles and early voices, we linger in the softest parts of the morning, where time feels slower and the world is not yet shaped by duty or noise, where the coolness of the stone floor meets the warmth of the hearth, and the rustling of tunics signals the start of motion within stillness. And from this soft place, we follow the arc of a Roman day from beginning to end, with the gentle curiosity of a traveler and the restful heart of a dreamer. Throughout this journey, we will step into homes and shops, baths and temples, kitchens and streets, and we will see how people worked, rested, prepared food, cared for children, made offerings to the gods, spoke to their neighbors, and found moments of beauty amid the ordinary. And by tracing these rituals and movements, we will begin to see Rome not as a museum of ruins or a place of myth, but as a living, breathing space filled with sounds and scents, colors and voices, where real people lived real lives full of quiet meaning. Each chapter you'll hear has been shaped with care to flow slowly, like water over polished stone, and every segment will last around 20 minutes, long enough for you to ease deeper into rest, for your body to soften into sleep, for your mind to drift between words and images without needing to hold on tightly. And there is no need to remember every name or object or fact, for the purpose of this story is not knowledge alone, but companionship and calm, a slow unfolding of time that mirrors the way dreams rise gently on the horizon of the mind. You may hear the word domus and imagine a house with tiled roofs and small inner courtyards. Or you may not, and that is perfectly fine, for this is not a test, but an invitation to simply be present with what arises, to allow the images to come and go like waves on a quiet sea. And if at any point your attention drifts or your breath deepens into sleep, you are still part of this journey, because the story is not meant to be chased or captured, but simply received, like moonlight falling through a window at night. The lives we'll encounter are not unlike ours in their essence, for though centuries and empires stand between us, the heartbeat of daily life remains much the same, People rose and dressed, ate and worked, laughed and worried, played music, whispered prayers, washed their hands and feet at the end of the day. They held children and kissed foreheads and wondered about tomorrow. And so, as we walk through their kitchens and workshops, their marketplaces and porticos, we may begin to feel a quiet familiarity, a resonance that stretches softly across time. Tonight, we let go of modern noise, of glowing screens and digital schedules, and step instead into the hush of antiquity, into a world where days unfolded with the sun and sleep came not from exhaustion, but from the slow satisfaction of being. And perhaps, as we listen, we might also begin to slow our own inner clocks, to remember that life is not meant only to be achieved, but also observed, that it is in the spaces between action where meaning often rests most gently. So come now into this soft and ancient place, not to study, not to memorize, but to feel, to walk slowly, to observe the ordinary with reverence and the quiet with care. For in the simple lives of ancient Romans, we may find echoes of our own, and as their day begins to unfold before us, so too may our breath deepen and our body surrender to rest, the story cradling us gently as we sleep. As the first rays of light begin to slip across the rooftops of the eternal city, the Roman domus stirs softly from its nightly slumber, not with urgency or alarm, but with the gradual unfolding of warmth and sound, and within its walls, a rhythm begins to awaken, subtle and unhurried. As shadows recede from the mosaic floors and the air takes on a golden hue, filtered gently through wooden shutters and linen curtains, the kind of light that seems to rest as much as it illuminates. And as your breath slows, imagine this moment of transition, the hush before the day fully begins, a threshold between sleep and wakefulness. The household, still cloaked in the final whispers of dreams, comes to life with quiet motion, the rustling of tunics being lifted from clay hooks, the soft splash of water being poured into wide ceramic basins, the gentle whisper of bare feet crossing stone floors that hold the memory of the night's coolness. And there is a sense of reverence in this first light, a respect for the new day that is both practical and sacred. For the Romans, like many ancient peoples, understood the morning not as something to rush through, but as a moment to be moved through carefully and with intention. In the atrium, the heart of the domus, morning light pools like warm honey, falling through the compluvium, the open skylight at the center of the roof, and glistening gently upon the impluvium below. A shallow marble basin that collects rainwater and reflects the changing sky above. And around this space, the family begins to gather, not in hurried clamor, but in shared stillness, greeting the day and one another with the calm simplicity of routine long established, where roles are known and rhythms understood without the need for many words. The paterfamilias, head of the household, may rise with dignity and purpose, his tunic draped neatly over his shoulder, his steps steady as he moves from his cubicula, the sleeping chamber, to the central space of the house, perhaps pausing to dip his hands into the cool water and bring it to his face in a silent act of cleansing and renewal. And beside him, his wife, the materfamilias, might already be overseeing the first domestic tasks of the day. Her presence quiet but felt, her voice low, and even as she speaks softly to the household slaves and attendants who prepare the first meal. In these early hours, the domus is a place of gentle order, of tasks carried out not with haste, but with practiced grace. The opening of wooden shutters to let in the air, the lighting of small oil lamps to chase away lingering shadows, the folding of sleeping garments and the sweeping of the courtyard stones, and every sound feels soft by the space itself, absorbed into the smooth walls and woven mats, until all that remains is a hush filled with purpose, a silence that is not empty, but full of motion and disguise. The kitchen, or kalina, begins to emit its own gentle chorus, the soft crackle of kindling catching flame, the hiss of oil in an earthen pan. the scent of barley cakes warming over the fire, and nearby, a servant grinds grain with rhythmic, patient motion, the stone rubbing against stone in a sound as old as civilization itself. And this slow preparation of food is not just nourishment for the body, but a ritual that anchors the household in time, signaling that the day has truly begun. The children, if the family has them, stir slowly from their sleep, their young voices still quiet, their movements drowsy and uncoordinated as they blink against the growing light and search for familiar hands to guide them into wakefulness. And for a moment, they may linger in the safety of their cubicula, wrapped in linen covers before emerging into the wider spaces of the house, their steps echoing softly on terracotta tiles as they move toward the warmth of the hearth and the smell of breakfast. Small tasks are taken up naturally. Slaves and freedmen begin to tidy the inner rooms, bringing fresh water from the cistern, arranging the household gods at the lararium for morning offerings, and tending to the courtyard garden if one is present, where herbs glisten with dew and the first light brushes the leaves of rosemary and laurel with gentle hands. And every gesture, no matter how simple, carries with it the weight of custom, of repetition passed down over generations, and there is something soothing in that continuity, something deeply human. At the shrine of the household spirits, incense may be lit and a few drops of wine offered, the flames dancing lightly as the smoke curls upward and disappears, and this act, though quiet and brief, is central to the morning, connecting the living to the dead, the present to the past, and grounding the day in a sense of gratitude and reverence. And as you imagine this soft ritual, you might feel your own breath growing more steady, your own thoughts loosening their grip, as if soothed by the scent of frankincense and the flicker of a flame. The sounds from the street begin to rise now, not loud, not jarring, but distant and atmospheric, the bray of a mule, the call of a vendor, the distant clatter of wooden wheels passing over uneven stone. And the domus, though set apart from the bustle of the city, is never entirely sealed from it. And these sounds blend gently with the internal rhythm of the house, like layers of a song that plays every day in a slightly different key. Breakfast is served simply, but with care, perhaps flatbread with cheese and olives. A handful of figs or dates, a cup of watered wine, or a spoonful of porridge, and it is not a meal for feasting, but for grounding the body and preparing it for the tasks ahead, eaten with hands that know the texture of earth and fire, of labor and prayer, and there is no rush to finish, no clamor to consume, only the quiet chewing, the slow sip, the pause between bites, and the occasional murmur of morning voices rising and falling like birdsong. In the women's quarters, garments are being folded, hair is being braided, small children are being soothed or dressed, and preparations are being made for the coming responsibilities, whether that be managing the home, assisting in trade, supervising education, or tending to the garden, and all of it unfolds without command, like a river that has long known its path. And there is comfort in that flow, in the way domestic life wraps gently around those within it, holding them in place even as the world turns. In the atrium once more, a small dog stretches in the sunbeam that has now made its way across the floor, and the first shadows have already begun to shift with the rising sun, and in the corners, a servant carefully dusts a family bust, wiping gently along the lines of a marble face whose name has not been spoken aloud in years, but whose presence is still honored, and this care for memory, for lineage, for daily acts of remembrance, brings a kind of softness to the home that is not seen, but deeply felt. Outside, the sky grows bluer, and the quiet of morning begins to give way to the hum of midday, but within the domus, time still feels suspended, as though the walls themselves protect the family from the haste of the outside world, and for just a while longer, the rhythms remain slow and steady, filled with breath and motion, but not urgency, like the long inhale before a phrase is spoken or the stillness before a song begins. And as this part of the day draws to a close and the household prepares to step more fully into its labors and duties, there remains in the air a softness, a sense that the morning has been given its due, that the rituals have held the family in peace, that the light has blessed the home with quiet warmth, and now the day may continue. Not rushed, not shouted, but embraced slowly, step by step, with the calm certainty that life will unfold as it always has, with grace, with purpose, with quiet beauty. The moment you step beyond the threshold of the domus, the world changes, not abruptly, but in subtle layers of sound, scent, and motion. The quiet stillness of the home giving way to the soft murmur of life unfolding in the street. And though the Roman city is often imagined as loud and chaotic, the morning still holds a certain calmness, a gentle settling before the heat rises and the pace of commerce intensifies. And in this early hour, the street greets you not with crowds, but with detail, with warmth clinging to the stone, with birdsong weaving through courtyards, and with the distant hum of waking voices. The paving stones beneath your feet are uneven but familiar, worn smooth by generations of footsteps, by sandals and carts and rainwater. And as you walk, you begin to feel the quiet pulse of the city beneath you, not as noise but as rhythm, the measured clatter of wooden wheels in the distance, the creak of a wooden sign swinging above a shop, the muted thud of a broom sweeping dust from a threshold. And each sound blends into the next like verses in a hymn, a sacred kind of song dedicated not to gods, but to the ordinary act of living. You pass beneath the shadow of tall, insulate multi-story apartment buildings rising in stone and brick, their upper balconies tangled with drying laundry and pots of herbs, their lower floors housing shops and workshops that are just beginning to open, the scent of warm bread wafting from a bakery, the smoky trace of charcoal from a smithy's forge. And though these buildings may seem humble, they hold countless stories, countless mornings like this one, unfolding behind shuttered windows and half-open doors. Vendors begin to set up their stalls at the edges of the forum or along the wider avenues, their voices low for now, their movements methodical, arranging baskets of olives, amphorae of oil, bolts of cloth, and trays of fresh fruit in careful patterns that speak of pride as much as practicality. And as you pass by, your senses are drawn to each table, the sheen of a ripe fig, the perfume of rosemary tucked into a jar of salt, the soft rustle of linen being unfolded in the breeze, and each detail invites you to linger, to observe, to feel the texture of life with your eyes and breath. Children dart between adults with the curious energy of the very young, their laughter sharp and sudden, but brief, as they are quickly called back by the firm but loving hands of mothers or older siblings. And beside them, elderly men sit on low stools, their bodies still but their eyes keen, watching the street unfold as they've watched it for years, their conversations quiet, full of memory and rhythm, as if the stones beneath them have become part of their very bones. The baker's oven releases waves of heat and scent into the morning air, and for a moment you pause near the entrance, inhaling deeply the rich aroma of rising dough and toasted grain. And there is something sacred in that moment, something deeply grounding. For bread is not only food but ritual, the centerpiece of the Roman table, the mark of a household in motion. And to smell it baking is to feel time moving gently forward, a signal that the day is indeed unfolding. You step aside to let a cart pass, a wooden frame pulled by a sleepy mule whose hooves clatter rhythmically on the stone, and the cart itself is loaded with earthenware jugs and baskets of produce, the driver nodding slowly as he guides the animal forward, his face weathered by sun and patience, and you watch them go, not hurriedly, but with a sense of gratitude for the presence of others in this shared landscape, for the invisible thread that connects every morning walker to the machinery of the city. As you continue, you pass doorways carved with symbols, small altars with offerings tucked into niches on the walls, little sprigs of laurel, coins, even bits of bread left for the spirits that guard the street and home. And these quiet marks of devotion speak not of spectacle but of habit, of belief woven gently into the daily path. And as you notice them, your steps slow a little, your breath deepens, and you may even find your own sense of sacredness rising gently from the quiet stone. The sounds begin to grow, but never overwhelm, the clink of tools being lifted in a workshop, the splash of water being poured across the stoop of a tavern, the call of a fishmonger announcing the day's catch, and all of it blends into the background like a fabric being woven thread by thread, and within it, you remain still, walking slowly, not a stranger to the noise, but part of it, immersed in the gentle choreography of a living city that does not need to perform, but simply continues. You pass a fountain where cool water spills from the mouth of a carved lion into a wide stone basin, and nearby, a woman dips a jug beneath the flow while her child watches the ripples with quiet fascination. And the sound of the water is soothing, clear, and steady, a kind of music for the street. And for a moment, you pause to listen, to watch the sunlight dance across the rippling surface, to let your thoughts dissolve into that motion, to feel the calm that comes not from silence, but from rhythm. Turning a corner, you find yourself walking beside a garden wall draped in ivy, and above it you catch glimpses of a private courtyard, orange trees heavy with fruit, birds flitting from branch to branch, and laughter echoing faintly from within. And though you cannot see much, you feel the presence of life there, the intimacy of a quiet space just beyond reach, and it brings a sense of comfort to know that the city is made not only of stone and commerce, but of hidden stillness and soft domestic joy. Along the way, you pass inscriptions carved into stone, faded by time but still legible, fragments of messages left by those who walked these streets centuries before you, and you run your hand across the worn grooves, not to read, but to feel, to connect for a moment with those unseen lives, and in that touch, you sense something tender, the continuity of breath and movement across time, a reminder that to walk is to belong, that every footstep you take echoes gently through history. The sun has risen a little higher now, casting longer shadows across the street, and the warmth on your shoulders feels like a blessing, not harsh but steady, wrapping you in the same light that once fell on the backs of scholars and slaves, mothers and soldiers, poets and bakers, and you realize that the day is no longer beginning, that unfolding, opening like a scroll across the city, and you are part of its script, a quiet character in a larger, ongoing story. At the next corner, a small group gathers around a man reading aloud from a scroll, his voice rising and falling with the rhythm of practiced speech, and while you do not stop to listen, you feel the vibration of his words lingering in the air, part of the morning's atmosphere, mingling with the scent of wet stone and sun-warmed fig trees. And there is a strange comfort in knowing that language moves through these streets too, not just tools and trade, but thoughts and ideas, poetry and laughter. And as you come to the end of your walk, the domus once again in view, you feel no urgency to return, only the soft satisfaction of movement without haste, of presence without demand. And with every step that brought you through the city, your breath has deepened, your mind has quieted, and your heart has slowed into the pace of the ancient world, where life, though full of work and motion, still made space for rhythm, for beauty, and for the quiet unfolding of each day as a sacred and unrepeatable gift. Food in ancient Rome was never merely a matter of sustenance. It was a ritual, a rhythm, a way of marking time and expressing identity. And as you let yourself drift into this quiet space, imagine for a moment the early morning stillness just beginning to give way to the gentle preparations of the first meal of the day, known as the intaculum, a breakfast that was not grand or ceremonial, but simple, practical, and intimate, often taken quietly at home with soft light filtering through the shutters and the aroma of bread warming over the embers. The intaculum was not rushed, nor was it elaborate. It often consisted of yesterday's bread slightly moistened with water or wine, perhaps accompanied by olives, dried fruits, or a piece of cheese, and though modest, it carried with it the quiet comfort of routine, a familiarity of beginning the day with something warm and grounding, and for those of higher status, it may have included boiled eggs or leftover fish, but most Roman families partook in the same basic fare, a humble connection between the rich and poor, between slave and master, all greeting the morning with the same first bite. The act of eating was often done not in isolation, but together. And while early meals were casual and may have been taken while standing or seated on low stools, the midday and evening meals invited more structure, more intention, and more connection. And so we come to the prandium, the midday meal, which in many ways resembled our modern idea of lunch, yet without the haste that often accompanies it in our time, instead taken slowly, often in the shade of a portico or in the cool of a garden, where clay plates held vegetables, legumes, fruits, and small portions of meat or fish, depending on the household's means. For the working classes, the prandium might be eaten outside the home, in a bopina or a tavern where food was sold fresh and hot, ready to be eaten quickly before returning to labor. And these taverns were filled with the aroma of stews simmering in large pots, of baked bread resting in baskets, and the voices of merchants and workers filling the air like music. But even in these busier settings, there was a sense of pause, of reprieve, a short moment to breathe, to taste, to belong among others in the dance of daily life. For wealthier Romans, particularly those who did not work with their hands, prandium was an opportunity for leisure, to recline if time permitted, to converse, to enjoy figs and honey pastries, boiled eggs with sauces of herbs, small fish cooked with wine and oil, and meals might be accompanied by diluted wine, sweetened with spices or honey, sipped slowly not to intoxicate, but to soften the heat of the day and open the senses to the simple pleasure of taste. But it was in the evening, as the day cooled and the shadows lengthened, that the most significant meal took place, the cena, the Roman dinner, a ritual that evolved over centuries, from a modest repast to a sophisticated multi-course banquet among the elite. And even for the more humble, the cena was a time of togetherness, a moment to end the day, not in haste or exhaustion, but in the shared presence of others around a table or reclining on cushioned benches in the triclinium. In the wealthier homes, the triclinium was the heart of the social evening, a room designed for dining and leisure, where 3 couches formed a U-shape around a central table, and guests reclined on their left side, eating with their right hand as servants moved quietly through the space, offering dishes, pouring wine, removing plates, and the meal unfolded slowly, not all at once, but in waves, from appetizers known as gustaccio to main dishes or mensae primae, and finally to the sweet course, the mensae secundae, often featuring fruit, nuts, honey, and cheese. The setting of the table was itself a practice of elegance and care, with fine ceramics or silver, napkins folded delicately, and often flowers or small statues placed nearby to bring beauty to the moment, and candles or oil lamps cast flickering light across the walls, painting gentle shadows that danced with the conversation and everything about the space. The scents, the sounds, the softness of the cushions invited the body to relax and the mind to slow down. For those who could afford it, the cena was an event that might last for hours, with music, readings of poetry or philosophy, and soft conversation that meandered like a stream, touching on life, politics, weather, family, and laughter. And while the food nourished the body, the company nourished the spirit. And though some gatherings were ostentatious, many were simply opportunities for rest, for pleasure, for reconnection after the busyness of the day. Yet even in more modest homes, the cena held importance. It might be just bread and lentils, perhaps a little fish or sausage if available, eaten on stools around a low table, but it was sacred in its own way, a time when family gathered, when stories of the day were exchanged, when silence was allowed to sit without tension, and when the flicker of a single oil lamp lit not only the room, but the invisible bond between those who shared it. Roman food culture also carried spiritual weight, as many meals began with small offerings to the Lares, the household gods, who were believed to protect the home and family, and before bread was broken, a pinch might be thrown into the hearth or onto the ground, a gesture of gratitude and reverence, reminding all who sat to eat that they were not alone, that the dead and the divine watched over them, that the act of eating was not only physical but sacred. The diet itself was shaped by the land and the seasons, by trade and conquest, and though the poor often subsisted on grain and pulses, the variety of Roman cuisine grew vast over time, including imports like dates from the east, oysters from the coast, pepper from India, and wines from Greece and Gaul, and every bite was a reflection of Rome's place in the world, of the interconnected web of agriculture, travel, and trade that sustained the empire's body as well as its culture. There were rules too, spoken and unspoken, how to recline properly, how to serve, who sat where, what topics were appropriate to discuss, and what foods should be eaten first. And yet beneath these layers of etiquette, the human heart of the meal remained, the desire to be nourished, to be seen, to be safe, and in that way, a Roman meal, no matter how grand or humble, was not unlike our own today, a space for warmth, for laughter, for silence and care. As the meal came to an end, wine was served again, perhaps with diluted honey or warm spices, and conversation would quiet as guests leaned into the cushions, bellies full and minds at ease. And in this final phase, there was often a shared stillness, a breath held softly among friends, a moment when time seemed to pause just briefly before dispersing into night, and the city beyond the walls of the domus continued its hum while inside another day was gently completed. And as you let your breath grow deeper and your own thoughts begin to slow, you may find that this Roman meal, though centuries away, brings with it a familiar sense of peace, of rhythm, of belonging to something older than words. And just as they did, you may now rest your body, knowing the day has been witnessed, the hunger satisfied, and the story still gently unfolding beneath the quiet glow of sleep. Among the many wonders of daily life in ancient Rome, few spaces were as deeply woven into the fabric of society as the public baths, or thermae, places where water, stone, and steam converged into a ritual not only of cleanliness, but of community, of healing, of reflection. And as you begin to drift through this moment in time, let your breath deepen and slow, and imagine yourself approaching one of these great bathing complexes in the gentle warmth of the afternoon. The marble steps worn smooth beneath your sandals, and the air around you carrying the scent of oil, of moisture, and of well-tended stone. The outer walls of the bathhouse rise high and solid, a silent monument to the engineering prowess of Roman builders. And as you step through the arched entrance, the world outside begins to melt away, replaced by a hushed echo of voices, the rhythmic sound of dripping water, and the soft shuffle of bare feet over polished floors. And immediately, your senses shift, attuning to the temperature of the space, to the play of light filtered through high windows, to the tranquil hum of human presence and repose. Before entering the bathing chambers, visitors pass through the appetiterium, the changing room, where rows of niches line the walls for storing garments and small valuables. And here, attendants move with practiced care, helping visitors undress and prepare for the sequence of baths to come. And the rustling of linen and the soft clink of jewelry being removed fills the room with a quiet rhythm. While voices remain low, conversations murmured in tones that match the space itself, open, unhurried, almost reverent. From there, the bather proceeds into the tepidarium, the warm room, where the air is thick with gentle heat and the walls seem to hold the warmth like an embrace. And this space serves as a transition, a soft invitation for the body to loosen, for the muscles to unclench, for the breath to deepen naturally. And as you recline on a stone bench or simply stand in stillness, The warmth seeps into your skin and bones, melting the stiffness of the outside world away with every passing minute. The next chamber, the caldorium, is hot and steamy, with pools of near-scorching water and basins for pouring heated water over the body. And here, bathers sweat deeply, drying impurities from their pores, while oil is applied to the skin in slow circular motions and then scraped away gently with curved metal tools called strigils. And the process, though simple, is ancient and intimate, a form of purification that reaches beyond the body and to the mind as tension dissolves and thoughts become smooth and fluid like the rising steam itself. You may close your eyes now and imagine the feeling of steam curling against your face, of warm droplets forming along your arms, of your heartbeat sensing to the ambient hush, and the voices that surround you are softened by the vapor, indistinct and almost melodic, and for a moment, you feel part of something larger, not just a body being cleansed, but a presence within a ritual that has repeated itself across centuries, quiet and eternal as water flowing over stone. From the caldorium, you step back into the tepidarium briefly, letting your body adjust, your breath return to a gentler rhythm, before moving into the frigidarium, the cold room, where crisp water awaits to invigorate and awaken the senses. And this plunge is both bracing and renewing, a sharp contrast that seals the experience, bringing clarity to the mind and lightness to the body. And though brief, this moment is vivid, like the first morning air after a long night's sleep. Beyond the physical cleansing, the baths are spaces of social harmony, where distinctions of class, occupation, and age are softened, if not erased, by shared presence in a space designed for rest and well-being. And here, senators may bathe beside merchants, teachers beside poets, and conversations unfold across age and status. From the trivial to the philosophical, in a setting that encourages reflection rather than performance, communion rather than competition. Inside rooms, massage oils are warmed and applied with gentle hands, fingers kneading tired shoulders and limbs with practiced care, not hurriedly but attentively, and the smell of rosemary, myrrh, and olive oil fills the air, mingling with the steam to create a scented mist that clings softly to the skin. And in this moment, the body is honored not for its beauty or its power, but for its presence, its effort, its capacity to carry life forward through labor, through joy, through sorrow. The architecture of the baths reflects this reverence. Vaulted ceilings arch overhead like the sky itself, with painted frescoes and marble columns surrounding the pools. And the very walls seem to hum with serenity, built not only for function but for beauty, so that the act of washing becomes one of communion with space, with light, with silence. And there is peace in this design, in the way the heat travels through the floors, in the way the light dances on the surface of the water, in the way sound lingers and then fades. Children laugh softly in one corner, splashing in shallow pools under the watchful eyes of parents or tutors. And their joy is subdued but pure, the kind of laughter that bubbles up gently rather than bursts forth. And even here, the tone of the baths is respected, a kind of ambient etiquette that everyone understands instinctively, not from rules, but from the space itself, which seems to invite and enforce its own sense of calm balance. And there are those who come not to bathe, but simply to sit, to breathe, to listen, to be in the presence of others without needing to speak or do. And for these visitors, the bathhouse is a place of quiet companionship, of silent rituals, of invisible threads that bind the community together in softness and ease. And perhaps this is what makes the bath so essential, not just the cleansing of the body, but the restoration of the spirit through shared stillness and warmth. As the visit draws to a close, bathers return to the appetiterium, where dry linen is offered and garments are slowly redonned, and there is no rush to leave, only the soft, lingering quiet of a body now lighter, skin now clean, thoughts now clearer, and many linger in the vestibule or just outside, drinking water, chatting quietly, feeling the air on their damp skin and letting the outside world slowly reappear as if emerging from a cocoon of warmth and reflection. The sun is lower now, and shadows stretch across the courtyard outside the baths, where fig trees and laurels sway gently in the breeze. And as you step out into the street again, you carry with you more than the scent of oil or the softness of skin. You carry calm, clarity, a renewed presence, a body and mind brought gently back into harmony by water, by heat, by stillness, by time, and by the quiet intimacy of ancient ritual. And perhaps now, as you settle your breath once more, as you allow your eyes to close and your limbs to rest, you feel the weight of your own day begin to slip away, not lost, but soothed, softened, like footprints washed from warm stone by a passing breeze. And in that stillness, you are held gently, as the Romans were, by water and warmth, by ritual and rhythm, by the timeless comfort of simply being. As you walk through the streets of Rome in the early light of day, a subtle shift in the atmosphere begins to announce your approach to something grander, something deeper in meaning and resonance. For ahead of you lies not just a space of stone and marble, but the very heart of Roman identity, the Forum Romanum, the civic and symbolic core of the city, where the echo of history mingles with the dust of countless footsteps. And as you move forward, each breath grows slower, your awareness deepens, and you begin to feel the pull of this place that once held the voices and visions of an empire. The approach is lined with ruins, though at the time of its height, these structures stood tall and proud temples, basilicas, arches and columns rising from the earth like carved memories, each one bearing the weight of generations of debates and decrees, of victories celebrated and losses mourned. And as your eyes trace the broken lines of architecture, softened now by time and nature, you feel no loss, only presence, as though the spirit of the Forum still lingers gently in every joint and jointless space. The Via Sacra, the sacred road that winds through the Forum, stretches out before you in ancient stone, worn and uneven from the passage of so many feet senators in their togas, generals in triumphal procession, merchants carrying scrolls and scales, mothers guiding children by the hand, each one now part of the silent legacy embedded in the cracks and grooves beneath your step. And as you follow its path, you are not walking alone, but accompanied by the echoes of thousands who came before. To your left, the Temple of Saturn stands in solemn grace, its towering columns catching the morning sun, and behind them, the ancient altar once used for offerings during the Saturnalia. Rome's festival of renewal and reversal reminds you that even in the most austere institutions, joy and ritual once flourished, and this juxtaposition of solemn structure and celebratory tradition gives the Forum a kind of breathing rhythm, a balance between order and humanity that feels deeply grounding. The Curia Julia, the Senate House, rests quietly now, its doors long closed to debate, but in your imagination, the space comes to life with the rustle of togas, the deliberate cadence of orators, the focused gazes of elder statesmen gathered beneath a coffered ceiling. And though power may have changed hands countless times, and though many of their decisions have crumbled into dust, the energy of civic engagement still clings to those walls like morning mist that refuses to lift. In the open spaces between temples and courts, the basilicas once buzzed with conversation, legal proceedings, public announcements, and the murmurs of negotiation. And these covered halls were not religious, but practical, places where the rhythm of civic life unfolded in all its complexity. And though the voices are gone, the form remains. Arches framing light and shadow, columns holding up not just stone, but memory. And as you walk among them, you begin to sense the gravity of presence, of being here, of being still. In one corner of the Forum stands the rostra, the speaker's platform adorned with the prows of captured ships, a symbol of Rome's naval power and pride. And from this raised platform, voices once rang out across the crowd, weaving rhetoric, policy, and passion into a singular thread of public life. And as you imagine those voices, Cicero, perhaps, or an unknown merchant pleading for justice, you realize that civic life was not abstract or distant, but personal, visceral, full of breath and intention. The arch of Septimius Severus stretches above the road like a stone cloud, carved with battle scenes and inscriptions that once boasted of imperial triumphs, and though the victories may have faded in detail, the arch remains a testament to the Roman desire to commemorate, to make permanent the fleeting surge of conquest. And as you pass beneath it, your body feels smaller, not diminished, but held gently within the scale of empire. A reminder that all grandeur is built one stone, one step, one voice at a time. Beyond the monuments, you notice the quieter details, the worn steps of an altar, the groove where a chariot wheel passed again and again, the carved graffiti etched by a bored apprentice. And in these small remnants, the Forum feels more human, less monumental and more lived in, as though every inch of this civic stage has absorbed the pulse of the people who used it. And in that intimacy, the grandeur becomes more accessible, more real, more comforting. The Forum was not only a place of power, but also of proximity to others, to decision-making, to belief and change. And it was common to see friends greeting one another, lawyers speaking with clients, children darting between columns, and teachers gesturing toward a scroll as students leaned in. And this tapestry of activity wove together the private and public, the personal and political, in a way that made civic life not just a duty, but a rhythm, a habit, a shared breath. You might now imagine yourself finding a stone bench near the edge of the Forum, where the view is open and the air carries the scent of fig leaves from a nearby tree. And as you sit, letting your body rest and your breath lengthen, you look out not at ruins, but at continuity, at a space that held the daily heartbeat of an empire, and still holds the memory of connection, of discourse, of visibility, and perhaps of hope. The light shifts slightly, casting long lines across the flagstones, and the quiet becomes deeper, almost meditative, and you sense that though the ceremonies are long over, and though no more scrolls are being unrolled upon the speaker's podium, the Forum still listens, still receives, still holds within its stones the ability to witness human life unfolding. For the Romans, civic life was not limited to politicians or elites, but was a shared experience, an unfolding performance that included all who passed through these arches. And it is in this spirit that the Forum becomes not just a museum or monument, but a kind of living breath, a rhythm that continues softly beneath the feet of every visitor, of every dreamer who closes their eyes and lets the silence speak. And as you slowly stand to continue your walk, you do so with a sense of groundedness, of having paused in a place that was never meant to rush, where words mattered, where presence mattered, and where silence, too, was allowed to hold its own space. So now, as the stone warms beneath your feet and the light continues to soften around you, you may carry with you not only a memory of marble and columns, but a deeper sense of civic rhythm, of the beauty of gathering, of the power of shared spaces, and of the timeless comfort found in simply being part of a story that continues to unfold, gently, calmly, without urgency. As the day in ancient Rome slowly unfolds toward its peak, a new dimension of daily life begins to softly emerge, not in the noise of the markets, nor in the strength of the forums, but in the silent and reverent sphere of religion. And as you walk through streets lined with cypress trees and columns, with golden sunlight filtering through stone facades, you approach a space that seeks not applause nor spectacle, but a quiet, continuous connection between humans and the divine. Religion in Rome was not about blind faith or rigid dogma, but a daily practice deeply intertwined with the order of the world, a network of rituals, gestures, formulas, and offerings that maintain harmony between mortals and gods. And in that constant rhythm of honoring, requesting, thanking, and observing, Romans found not only comfort but also stability, a way to understand uncertainty, to soothe fears, and to bring meaning to the invisible forces that governed life and death. In every neighborhood, in every home, at every crossroads, there were small altars dedicated to the Lares and Penates, the protective spirits of the household and family, and it was customary to offer them bread, wine, or flowers at the start of the day, with quiet gestures and softly spoken words, as if conversing with a loved one who is always present, though unseen. And in that daily repetition of small devotional acts, an intimate connection with the sacred was woven, a spirituality that was not abstract, but rooted in simplicity and nearness. But beyond the domestic realm, religion was also expressed in temples. Those structures of marble, brick, and time that stood majestically in public spaces, with wide stairways, tall columns, and pediments adorned with reliefs. And as you approach one of them, you feel how the atmosphere begins to shift, how the air becomes denser, quieter, more ceremonial, as if the very stones hold the whispers of centuries of prayers. One of the oldest temples in Rome was dedicated to Vesta, goddess of the hearth and the sacred flame, and there, inside a round building with Doric columns, a fire burned day and night, never to be extinguished. Watched over by the Vestal virgins, priestesses chosen from girlhood to preserve that flame which symbolized the continuity of the state. And in their silence, in their white garments and measured steps, devotion took form not in words, but in constant presence and serene dedication. On the Capitoline Hill, high above the city, stood the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, father of the gods, lord of thunder, of order, and of oaths. And there official offerings were made, vows were spoken, and treaties were sealed. For in Rome, the sacred and the political were not separate spheres, but deeply intertwined. And every important action required divine approval, or at least consultation, as if each human decision were also part of a vaster, unknowable plan. The sound of water from nearby fountains, the murmur of leaves, the faint crackle of an oil lamp lit before a statue, all contributed to the quiet atmosphere that surrounded the temples, and inside, light entered through small openings, touching slowly the stone figures of Minerva, Mars, Venus, or Mercury, who were not mere sculptures but living representations of divine energies, archetypes of knowledge, war, love, and commerce, inspiring those who invoked them with respect and reverence. On certain days of the calendar, the streets filled with processions, flowers, chants, and incense floating in the air like an invisible veil. And these celebrations, called feriae, were not simply festivities, but moments when the human and the divine met publicly, in community, with dances, symbolic sacrifices, games, oracles, and banquets, reminding all that time could also be sacred, that not everything was labor or duty, but also spiritual renewal and shared joy. The figure of the augur, the priest who read the flight of birds, or the direction of thunder to interpret divine will, speaks of a sensibility deeply connected with nature, with signs, with the mystery that dwells in the everyday. And thus, the divine was not only distant and celestial, but something that manifested in the wind, in smoke, in dreams, in the silence between phrases. And in that reverence for the invisible, the Roman soul found a center, a pause. Temples were not places of mass congregation like some churches today, but spaces for observation, sacrifice, consultation, and personal offering. And so, upon entering, no homily or collective song was expected, but rather deep stillness, tranquil contemplation, a way of looking inward through the outward act of lighting a candle or leaving a coin at the feet of a millennia-old statue. And while the principal gods had temples in the forum or on the hills, there were also smaller sanctuaries in the fields, forests, caves, and springs where people went to ask for fertility, health, protection, or simply companionship. And that wilder, more natural dimension of Roman religion reminded all that the sacred didn't always require marble or architecture. but merely the open and attentive presence of someone seeking in humility and silence. In the quietest hour of the afternoon, when the sun begins to descend and marble turns amber, temples seem to exhale a special calm, a stillness that is not the absence of life, but full presence. And if you sit on one of their steps and close your eyes for a moment, you can feel how time dissolves, how the weight of worry softens into the murmur of the wind, and how each stone seems to tell you that everything has its moment, its rhythm, its cycle. In Roman life, religion was not an obligation but a spiritual breath, a flow between the human and the eternal, between daily bread and the sacred fire that burns without ceasing. And that vision did not seek punishment or fear, but balance, harmony, respect for limits, for mystery, for the beauty that exists even in the simplest routine when lived with awareness. And now, as your breath grows slower, deeper, softer, perhaps you feel that you too are in that temple, surrounded by ancient columns, silent figures, golden light, and cool shadows, and maybe you understand, with no need for words, that the sacred was never far away, but very near, in your calm, in your listening, in your stillness, in your rest. When you think of life in ancient Rome, your mind might first wander to temples and triumphs, to legions marching or banquets overflowing. Yet beneath the grandeur and spectacle was the enduring pulse of labor, of humble hands in motion, of men and women who shaped the city not with proclamations or victories, but with daily effort and quiet repetition, and their trades, their crafts, their simple but essential work formed the backbone of Roman civilization, like the hidden roots that hold a mighty tree upright through seasons of change. As dawn bathed the rooftops in soft gold, the first stirrings of labor awakened the streets, and one by one, the shutters of workshops opened. Their wooden doors creaked aside, and artisans emerged like a slow exhale from the lungs of the city, ready to begin again, not with haste, but with the knowing rhythm of a day devoted to precision, to making, to serving, to creating something useful, something lasting, something quietly beautiful in its purpose. The bakers, among the earliest risers, filled the air with the scent of dough and rising warmth, their hands coated in flour as they shaped the bread that would nourish both noblemen and slaves. And the heat from the ovens glowed like small suns hidden within stone, steady and enduring, and as they worked with gentle movements and practiced ease, there was a calm to it all, a peace found in repetition, in the kneading, in the waiting, in the rising and the baking. Nearby, the potters sat beside their wheels, clay spinning between steady fingers, transforming formless earth into amphorae and lamps, plates and cups, and as the wheel turned, so too did time, slowly, steadily, with each round an echo of the last. And the potter's gaze was soft but focused, watching for imperfections, adjusting ever so slightly, and letting the shape reveal itself through patience. And at circular motion, there was something almost meditative, something timeless. In a darker corner of the city, the blacksmith's forge sent flickers of orange light dancing on soot-darkened walls, and the clang of hammer against metal rang like a slow heartbeat, measured and deliberate, never rushed, never careless, and through smoke and sweat, shapes emerged from raw ore, hinges and nails, blades and tools, and each piece carried not just function, but a quiet testament to the will of its maker, forged in fire and cooled in water and silence. Merchants in the market laid out their wares with care, arranging fruits in pyramids, weighing spices on small bronze scales, smoothing the folds of dyed cloth, and their voices murmured soft greetings to early customers, not loud or boastful, but familiar and warm. And amid the rustle of baskets and the soft clinking of coins, 1,000 tiny exchanges formed the social fabric of Rome, woven thread by thread through trade, conversation, and trust. Scribes and copyists sat in shaded rooms with papyrus stretched before them and inkpots balanced beside, their hands steady as they traced the elegant shapes of Latin characters one by one, as if planting a quiet garden of language. And around them, silence ruled, broken only by the gentle scratch of stylus on parchment. And their work, though unseen by crowds, preserved law, knowledge, poetry, and memory, letter by patient letter, a gift for generations they would never meet. Healers and herbalists walked from door to door or welcomed the ill into small, fragrant spaces filled with jars and dried leaves. And they listened more than they spoke, placing gentle hands on foreheads, mixing infusions, offering calm along with cure. And their medicine was not just physical but spiritual, a kind of presence, a reassurance that someone understood your pain. And in that understanding, relief often began before the remedy was ever brewed. Masons and builders worked slowly, stone by stone, under the open sky or beneath rising walls, their measurements precise, their progress steady. And as arches took shape and columns found their footing, they knew they were part of something greater, something that would last beyond them, and in each lifted beam, in each set cornerstone, was a quiet prayer for permanence, for solidity in a world always shifting. Weavers sat before their looms like musicians at an instrument, passing threads back and forth, over and under, in patterns learned by heart, and the cloth that emerged held color and texture, function and grace, and as their hands moved, their minds often wandered, thinking of children, of seasons, of stories passed down, and the cloth became more than clothing. It became memory made tangible, warmth given form. Teachers and philosophers gathered small groups of pupils in shaded courtyards or tucked away corners of the city, and their tools were not chisels or hammers, but questions, stories, and reflection. And with calm voices and open ears, they taught not just facts, but how to think, how to pause, how to wonder. And the wisdom they shared moved not just through time, but through silence, resting in the quiet moments between ideas. Slaves, too, labored in every trade, their condition unjust and painful, yet their presence woven deeply into every aspect of Roman life. And though their names are often lost, their hands built walls, carried loads, cooked meals, nursed children, and tended to the sick. And in their endurance and their unnoticed contributions, there was a dignity often unacknowledged, a human spirit that persisted, silent but unbroken. In the countryside, farmers turned soil under white skies, planting seeds that would become grain, olives, grapes, and the earth responded slowly but surely, offering fruit in due time, and those who tilled it moved with the patience of seasons, understanding that all labor is also waiting, and all waiting in some way is hope. And so, as you lie back now, listening to the slow unfolding of ancient work, you might imagine those quiet hands shaping the world, not for glory, not for praise, but simply for life, for the rhythm of doing, of making, of tending. And perhaps in that vision, in that gentle repetition, you find your own breath slowing, your thoughts softening, your body releasing its weight into the softness of rest. Here in the stream of Rome, every trade becomes a thread in the tapestry of time, each movement of hand or foot a verse in the long poem of history. And as the light dims and the tools are set down, what remains is not noise, not rush, but a calm dignity, a sacred stillness, a whisper that says, work was done today, and it was enough. In ancient Rome, food was more than nourishment, more than a daily necessity to sustain the body's energy. It was a cultural ritual, a sensory experience, a social glue that brought people together in the soft flicker of candlelight and the scent of herbs carried on the evening breeze. And as the day unfolded and the city moved through its rhythms of labor and worship, the quiet rituals of eating and drinking served as gentle pauses, reminders that life could be savored as much as endured. The morning began simply with a modest meal known as the intaculum, a quiet affair often eaten alone or with family in the courtyard of the home, and it might consist of bread dipped in wine, a few olives, some cheese, or a piece of fruit, and though it was not elaborate, There was something comforting in its simplicity, in the way it welcomed the day with familiar flavors and grounding textures. As the sun climbed higher and the streets of Rome buzzed with the footsteps of merchants and messengers, another light meal might follow, called the prondum, often taken mid-morning, perhaps on a shaded bench or in a quiet corner of a shop. And this meal might include cold leftovers, hard-boiled eggs, lentils, or perhaps a bit of salted fish, eaten not as a feast, but as a pause, a moment of nourishment wrapped in quietness. But it was the cena, the evening meal, that truly captured the Roman spirit of dining, a slow and thoughtful event that unfolded in stages, often beginning with gestatio, the appetizer course, where diners would enjoy eggs, salads with vinegar and herbs, small seafood bites, and dishes spiced with garum, the fermented fish sauce that added depth and character to Roman cuisine. As the courses progressed, the flavors grew richer, the pace slower, and conversation deeper, for a Roman dinner was not rushed but unfolded like a well-composed poem, with each dish a stanza, each flavor a verse. And meats like pork or lamb were often seasoned with honey or vinegar, stewed with dates, or served alongside chickpeas and leeks, creating combinations that were both hearty and aromatic, bold and soothing. Diners reclined on couches known as lecti, arranged around a central table in a room called the triclinium, and as they leaned on their left elbows and reached gently for bites of food, their gestures slowed, their voices softened, and the act of eating became something shared, something ceremonial, as if the table itself were a stage upon which the theater of daily life was gently played out. Wine, always diluted with water, accompanied most meals, and it was not consumed for intoxication but for pleasure and companionship, and depending on the occasion, it might be spiced with cinnamon, cloves, or herbs, and poured into ceramic cups that were passed with grace and rhythm, encouraging a kind of communion between those gathered. For wealthier Romans, the cena could last for hours and might include entertainment such as poetry readings, music, or light-hearted philosophical conversation. But even in modest homes, there was care taken in the preparation and the seasoning, in the order of courses, and above all, in the shared presence of those who gathered, a daily ceremony of connection and calm. Slaves worked silently behind the scenes, bringing in dish after dish with practiced steps, refilling cups, removing empty platters. Their movements quiet and unassuming, and yet their presence shaped the flow of the evening like an invisible current, keeping the space orderly and the guests at ease. And though their labor often went unrecognized, it was the foundation upon which the tranquility of the meal rested. The scent of rosemary, bay leaves, and cumin often lingered in the air, mingling with the low murmur of conversation and the occasional laugh. And there was no rush to finish, no anxious glance at clocks or lists of tasks, only the gentle cadence of being, of tasting, of listening, of resting in the company of others. In rural areas, meals were simpler still, drawn from what the earth provided: barley porridge, beans, garlic, and the sweetness of figs ripened in the sun. And the slow rhythm of rural life allowed food to be more than sustenance. It became a meditation, a daily reminder of one's connection to the land, to the cycle of seasons, and to the patient labor that brought each bite to the table. Even the vessels from which food was eaten carried meaning: terracotta bowls etched with patterns, wooden spoons smoothed by years of use, an amphorae that had traveled by ship and cart to bring oil or wine to Roman tables. And in touching these objects, one also touched the hands of those who made them, carried them, filled them, and passed them along. Certain foods held symbolic value: honey for blessing, fish for fertility, grains for prosperity. And so every meal held not just flavor but story, not just texture but intention. And in sharing these foods, Romans also shared hopes, memories, and quiet prayers. As darkness deepened and candles cast soft glows on painted walls, The final bites were taken slowly, a fig perhaps, or a drizzle of honey over cheese, and guests leaned back with full bellies and slower breath. And the silence that followed was not emptiness, but fullness expressed without words. A quiet gratitude for the bounty of life, however modest or grand. And now, as you drift deeper into stillness, you might imagine yourself reclining gently beneath frescoed ceilings, a cup resting in your hand, the scent of herbs in the air, and the warmth of food still lingering. And you might feel that in this slow and sacred act of dining, there is peace, there is rest, there is a return to the calm rhythm of simply being. In the quiet corners of ancient Rome, away from the clamor of the marketplace and the grand pronouncements of senators, another kind of ritual unfolded with the rising of the sun, not one of incense or sacrifice, but of thought, of inquiry, of young minds awakening to the shape of the world through the gentle repetition of syllables, of phrases, of ancient knowledge passed from one generation to the next. And this was the quiet heartbeat of Roman education. Not always grand, not always formal, but always vital, like the soft murmur of a stream nourishing the roots of a great tree. Children, often boys from privileged families, and sometimes girls as well, would rise early and gather their writing tablets, their wax-covered boards smoothed and blank, their styluses tucked beside. And perhaps they would walk with their pedagogue, a patient guide who led them not just through streets, but through lessons. And as they stepped through narrow alleyways and into shaded porticos, the city seemed to hush around them, making space for thought, for learning, for the slow blooming of understanding. Lessons began not in great halls, but in modest spaces, a shaded atrium, a public colonnade, a room within the home, and the voices of students echoed softly as they recited lines from Virgil or Cicero, their tones uneven but earnest, their eyes focused on the shapes of letters, the rhythm of Latin, the art of grammar and memory, and the teacher, known as the literator or the grammaticus, offered corrections not with harshness but with calm, steady patience, repeating where needed, and waiting as minds slowly opened. Reading and writing were taught through imitation, through repetition, and students would copy phrases again and again, watching how letters curved and aligned, how thoughts took form through language. And this act of writing was not rushed, but rather deliberate, reflective, like drawing water from a deep well, slow and cool and clear. Arithmetic followed, not through machines or abstractions, but through fingers and pebbles, through careful marks and simple tables. And each sum solved brought a small sense of certainty, of control, of understanding how things added up in the world. And this quiet confidence, built one calculation at a time, helped to ground the student not just in numbers, but in the order and balance that mathematics suggested. In higher levels, the teachings of philosophy entered, and with it came not just information but contemplation, not just answers but better questions, and young minds were asked to consider what is virtue, what is justice, what does it mean to live well. And as these questions hovered like morning mist in the air, the teacher would pause, and the students would think not aloud at first, but within, and from that silence, insight would slowly emerge like dawn from behind the hills. Some students would go on to learn rhetoric, the art of speaking well, and they would practice forming arguments, structuring their thoughts, using their voice not just to be heard, but to persuade, to move, to inspire. And this training prepared them not only for courts and forums, but for life itself, where every conversation held the potential to shape events, to mend conflicts, to lead. Books were rare and precious, handwritten by scribes, and students would often copy them by hand, line by line, ink slowly drying in the warm air. And each book copied became both a lesson and a treasure, a personal library of knowledge built through care and time. And the act of copying itself deepened understanding, allowing the words to move from page to heart through the steady work of the hand. Education was not limited to schools, for in the baths and at banquets, In walks through gardens or conversations in shaded courtyards, wisdom passed between generations, wrapped in stories and sayings. In observations and proverbs, and in these informal lessons, much was learned about human nature, about resilience, about the values that shaped the Roman world. Even among those who could not read, there was learning through work, through observation, through memory and imitation, and a young apprentice might learn his trade at the side of a master, watching, trying, failing, trying again. And in this slow cycle, a skill was born, honed, and handed down, becoming part of the invisible curriculum of the city. For many girls, formal education was limited, but within the home, mothers and older sisters taught the rhythms of daily life, the language of hospitality, the management of a household, and the art of storytelling. And these lessons, though quiet and often undocumented, carried wisdom that shaped not just families, but communities. The presence of enslaved educators and scribes also formed an often overlooked but essential thread in the fabric of Roman learning. For these individuals, though denied freedom, held and transmitted vast knowledge, teaching children, copying texts, and preserving the continuity of thought across generations, their silent labor a foundation upon which learning rested. As the day waned and the lessons came to a close, the writing tablets were set aside, the voices quieted, and students returned home with tired minds and ink-stained fingers, their thoughts still echoing with verses and questions, their imaginations gently stirred. And though the learning would fade into rest, it would return again with the sun, patient and steady as ever. And now, as you drift into your own quiet night, you might picture a small room bathed in golden afternoon light, the soft scratch of stylus on wax, the murmur of recitation, and the slow turning of ideas. And you might find comfort in that ancient rhythm, that slow, deliberate path toward understanding, knowing that wisdom does not arrive in flashes, but settles gradually, like snow on a quiet field. In that stillness and that unfolding, the mind softens, the breath deepens, and the thoughts of Rome's young learners float gently into sleep, carried on a breeze of language, numbers, and wonder. A lullaby of learning that continues, even now in dreams. As the long shadows of evening stretched gently across the streets of ancient Rome, a hush began to fall over the city, like a soft blanket drawn slowly across the shoulders of a world that had spent the day in movement and purpose and labor, and now turned quietly toward stillness. And this transition, from the bustle of daylight to the calm of night, was not abrupt but gradual, a fading of sound and light, a gentle exhale that signaled the end of another day. The marketplace, once vibrant with voices, began to dim, stalls covered with cloth, baskets emptied, scales packed away, and the vendors, weary but content, made their way home, their steps slower now, their faces touched by the golden hue of the setting sun. And as they walked, the city softened, its stone and marble glowing with a warmth that seemed to come not just from the sun, but from within, a memory of all that had passed through its streets. In homes both humble and grand, small lamps were lit, their flames flickering with a steady pulse that mirrored the quieting breath of the city. And families gathered in courtyards or beneath timber-bird ceilings, sharing final thoughts of the day, a story, a laugh, a moment of shared silence. And as they sat, the aroma of herbs still lingered from the evening meal, grounding them in the simple comfort of home. Children were tucked into small beds or cushioned nooks, their eyes heavy with the weight of sleep, their bodies curled like question marks against the soft fabric of dreams. And parents, with calm voices and gentle hands, whispered words of reassurance, of safety, of tomorrow. And those final murmurs were like lullabies woven into the quiet air, wrapping the young in the warmth of presence and peace. Outside, the sounds of Rome grew hushed to a cart's final rumble over stone, a distant bark, the flutter of pigeons settling into niches, and then, gradually, even these faded into the background, until only the occasional breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the scent of earth and olive trees, of worn brick and nighttime dew. The baths, which earlier echoed with conversation and splashing water, now stood empty, their still pools reflecting the first stars overhead, and the marble floors, cool beneath bare feet, held the memory of warmth and conversation, now replaced by silence, a silence that invited reflection, a silence that soothed rather than unsettled. High above, on the Palatine and the Aventine Hills, the city's more luxurious villas glowed softly, light spilling from windows like amber honey, and inside, soft fabrics were drawn around reclining forms, scrolls set aside, sandals removed, and eyes turned inward toward rest. And here, too, the breath of Rome slowed, matching the rhythm of the sleeping hearts within its walls. In more modest dwellings, woven mats and straw-stuffed mattresses offered the same promise of rest. And though the furnishings were simpler, the night offered its gifts without discrimination. Cool air, the hush of darkness, the fading pulse of thought, and above all, the shared sense that the day was over, its efforts complete, its burden set down. Priests and sentinels kept quiet watch, their torches casting gentle arcs of light against ancient stone, and though their task was vigilance, there was a sacred stillness in it, a reverence for the sleeping city, and they too moved slowly, their footsteps measured, as if not to wake the very walls that now dreamed of the sun. The moon rose, pale and watchful, drifting slowly across the Roman sky, its light silvering rooftops and temples, aqueducts and alleyways, casting a quiet unity over the city, binding rich and poor, child and elder, free and enslaved, in a shared lullaby of moonlight and shadow, of quiet breath and gentle slumber. In this hour, Rome was not a place of conquest or empire, not a city of law or spectacle, but simply a home for those who lived within its walls, who had risen and worked, spoken and listened, eaten and walked and loved, and now, with the stars above and the earth beneath, turned inward, not with fear, but with surrender, with trust in the turning of the world. Dreams stirred, delicate and unhurried, shaped by the contours of the day's memories, a conversation beside the fountain, the scent of figs, the laughter of a neighbor, the warm press of a hand, and these fragments, softened by sleep, wove themselves into stories with no beginning and no end, stories that needed no telling, only feeling. And somewhere beyond the city walls, where olive groves whispered and shepherds watched the stars, the same stillness prevailed, for night was not bound by walls or wealth, but belonged to all, a shared release, a common breath, and in that breath, the world was quiet and the soul, for a moment, at peace. As you rest now, perhaps you too feel the rhythm of that ancient night moving through you, a slow tide of calm and release, and as your own breath slows and your thoughts settle like dust upon marble, you become part of this timeless ritual, a sleeper in a city that no longer stands, yet still speaks in silence. And in that silence, in the hush between heartbeats, you find not just sleep, but sanctuary, a space where all that matters is this moment, this breath, this soft descent into the depths of rest, where history dreams with you, and you are gently, lovingly carried into sleep. As our journey through the quiet rhythms of ancient Rome draws to a close, you might feel the slow settling of your breath, the soft unfolding of your thoughts into calmness, and the gentle pull of sleep inviting you to rest deeper within yourself, like the city itself sinking into stillness beneath the vast darkening sky. The stories you've heard tonight, full of the subtle details and tender moments of daily life, are now folding into the fabric of your dreams, weaving a tapestry of peace, comfort, and timelessness. Let your mind wander freely, unburdened by haste or worry, carried on the soft currents of history that flow endlessly beneath our waking lives. Imagine the warm stone walls around you, the faint scent of olive and cedar carried on a slow breeze, the distant murmur of the Tiber River as it moves patiently through the city's heart. Feel how the quiet of the night enfolds you, a gentle embrace as soft as the finest Roman wool, comforting and steady. This is your moment, your sanctuary, a space where time slows and your spirit finds ease, where the past and present meet in harmony, and where sleep is a gentle friend welcoming you with open arms. In these last moments before rest, let the images of bustling streets, vibrant markets, and peaceful homes fade softly away, replaced by the soothing hush of moonlight and the slow beating of your own heart. Know that you carry the calm of this ancient world within you now, a quiet strength that will stay with you through the night and into the morning light. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, only here, only now, breathing in peace and breathing out all tension. Thank you for sharing this time and space with me, for allowing these stories to unfold gently in your mind, and for being present in this shared moment of quiet reflection. If you have found calm and comfort in this journey, please consider subscribing to the channel to continue exploring history's gentle stories together, liking the video to help others find this peace, and sharing your thoughts or where you're watching from in the comments below. Your presence here means more than words can say. As you drift further into sleep, may your dreams be soft and kind, filled with the whispers of ancient voices and the slow dance of shadows and light. Rest well, and know that when you awake, the world will be waiting with new stories, new moments of wonder, and new chances to find calm in the midst of all that life brings. Until then, sleep deeply, peacefully, and with the serene knowledge that you are held by time itself. Good night, and may your journey through sleep be as gentle and rich as the history we've shared tonight.